Welcome to A Creative Affair, and you're here with Len Metcalf, Bree Stockwell, and today's special guest is Nicki Gwynn-Jones. So I'm really bad at pronouncing things, and you have to excuse me with my mispronunciations there. But Nikki is an incredible photographer, lives in the Orkney Islands, and we're so delighted today to talk to you about creativity. And perhaps you'd like to introduce yourself to start off.
Of course. Thank you very much for the introduction, Len. And it's lovely to be with you and Bree. I'm thrilled and honoured to have been asked to join your podcast, and it's my great pleasure to talk to you today. So, yes, I live in the beautiful Orkney Islands off the north coast of Scotland. We've been here 7 years. I arrived here with our 2 elderly cats who sadly did not like the cold and didn't last very long, bless them. I used to be a swimming teacher in a former life when I was raising my children. But my parents were both very keen amateur photographers, wildlife, and my beloved Auntie Catherine, who was my father's sister, was an extraordinary woman, and really she is behind very much of what I do. She was a very talented musician, an artist. She knew so much about nature. She was very, very knowledgeable, but unfortunately her mental health issues meant that she couldn't get her knowledge and love of nature out into the world. So, the world was never able to appreciate what she could do and how much she knew. But when she died in 2003, I felt her on my shoulder, asking me to tell the world what she could not, to show the world the beauty, to tell the world of her love of the birds, particularly the wildlife, the magic that is out there. So that is really where it began for me. We were living in Florida at the time. And Bree, I don't know whether you know, but Florida is absolutely incredible for birds and, of course, alligators. But it was the birds that I really fell in love with. They're extremely tame, so you can get very close to them. And even with a little point and shoot that I had at the time, I was able to get some beautiful photographs of these gorgeous creatures. Well, when we moved back to the UK in 2007, I decided I was going to take the photography a little more seriously. I joined a camera club. I don't know whether you have such things in Australia and the US, but, really just to make friends, to meet like-minded people, to learn. And it was great up to a point, but I felt that they didn't encourage creativity, that word. So I decided to go out on my own, really. And eventually I gave up the swimming teaching because I just felt that I needed to empty my mind. I wanted to find a photographic project that I could really immerse myself in and really take it as far as I could. So we decided to move to the Orkney Islands, it's a group of islands, huge skies, lots of sea. You can see for miles, or you can't see at all because we've got the sea fret coming in, the sea har, the mist. It's a place of magic. The tales abound of mythical creatures and strange sea monsters that would take the fishermen. There's magic in the air. It crackles all around you here. And I just wanted to really explore this, get under its skin, and really, I suppose, express it in the way that I felt was, meant something to me and that hopefully other people would connect with. But at first, I just had no idea how to go about this. I won't say Orkney is featureless. It certainly isn't. It's got the most incredible coastline, beautiful cliffs, lots and lots of Neolithical remains. We've got a stone circle here that's older than Stonehenge, all these incredible things. But it's not as immediately photogenic as somewhere like the Outer Hebrides with, the Luscantire Beach and all those other things that they have there. And these huge skies meant that I just couldn't find a hook, I suppose, is what I would say. So I kind of wandered round for, I don't know, the best part of 9 months, I suppose, with my head literally in the clouds sometimes, just trying to think, well, how How can what does it mean to me? I couldn't see past the bigger picture for a long time. I've never been very good at the bigger picture. I'm absolutely hopeless at doing landscapes, useless. I need a telephoto lens in my hands. But then in the spring, the flowers started to sprout eventually. And I realized that was probably the way that I needed to go, was to really get down to a very intimate level, literally to get down on the ground and look into those spaces between the flowers, between the bluebells and the cowslips, because you can sense the fairy magic in those spaces. And sure enough, I found it. And it was a magical thing. And people seem to like it. People seem to connect with my talk of fairies. I sort of put a few things tentatively on Facebook and was very worried that I was just going to get laughed at. But actually, I didn't, because I think other people want to connect with those things too. Do you think? Do you think there's something in that idea? People want the magic.
I'm just like transfixed, because all I want to do right now is listen to the stories about the magic of the island.
Oh.
Yeah, I think part of what can sometimes make our creative work interesting is this idea of magic, infused into it, and something that we can't see that may or may not be there, or something that seems not of our realm, and
yeah,
and I think that's a really fun. It's a fun way to it's a fun thing to dream about, and it's a fun way to make art. Really, Len, thoughts?
It's a beautiful story as it unfolds right now,
Yes.
And I definitely feel magic with my subject as well, and it's something that I'm exploring and follow. And I'm inexplicably drawn to subjects to photograph, and I don't understand fully why I like some better than others, other than to figure out that that's who I am, and that seems to be my place in the world, to connect with it. Like I was transfixed when you said there was some, she was on your shoulder.
Yes.
And
yeah.
I have
very real.
I have someone on my shoulder or right behind me, and many mediums and people have felt that presence and talked to me about it. And in times of crisis, it's actually guided me many times, and I'm so thankful of it. And I don't understand. I have no understanding of this magic at all. But through experience, through multiple experiences, I've learned to trust and also to believe that there is special magic there.
Yeah, I don't think I actually want to understand the magic. I like to just have that aura, that essence, whatever you would want to call it. And right now we're coming into the summer months here, where it doesn't get dark. So we have this strange twilight from about 11 p.m. to about 3 a.m. where, well, if I could just how to say, we're so far north that the sunrise and sunset, the position of the sun in the sky is very, very different in summer than in winter. So in the middle of winter, at the winter solstice, the sun will rise after 9 a.m. in the southeast. So, and then it traces a very narrow arc across the horizon, only about 10 degrees above the horizon. And then it'll set at 3 p.m. in the southwest. So if you can imagine, that's a very narrow arc. But in midsummer, which is coming up, it will rise at 4 a.m. in the northeast, so southeast and northeast. And then it will trace the arc across the sky and set at 10:30 in the evening in the northwest. But what happens in midsummer is that you see this orange glow where the sun has set, and it travels across the northern sky to the northeast. And then at 4 a.m., the sun just pops up again. So you've got this strange, very magical twilight going on. And when I'm feeling strong, I stay up all night. Normally, for sunset, I go to my beloved Arctic terns, who are in the northwest corner of the island. And then I'll drive home to the east and have, I don't know, a cup of tea and toast or something like that. And then I will go down to the beach near where I live, in the northeast of the islands. And it's just incredible. It's just absolutely amazing. You can hear the seals singing their siren song. And it's so quiet that you can hear the eider ducks just plopping into the sea with their chicks. And there's dew everywhere and all these fairy sparkles as the sun comes up and you're lying on the wet ground, just looking for the fairy magic. And there it is, and it's wonderful. But sometimes when the sea har comes in and we get the mist, it's very strange. It's quite claustrophobic. Do you know the story of the Flying Dutchman? The ship. I can't. I've got to admit, I can't actually remember much about the legend.
I mean, is that the ship from Pirates of the Caribbean? No. So if it is, I think it might be. I'm going to Google that right now.
It is not. I can tell you that.
Okay.
But Google it anyway, because I've got to admit that I can't remember the story properly, but I do know that it's this ghost ship which is forever bound to just sail the seas. And, we have a lot of cruise ships who come and visit and they disappear into the har sometimes, like the Flying Dutchman ship. And it's, you can hear the foghorns and it's very, very atmospheric and mystical and very beautiful.
It's one of my...
It's in the Pirates of the Caribbean, by the way. I think it's in the third one.
Okay. Well,
I mean, yes, it's like this ghost ship with all these. Yeah, it's a little bit creepy, magical.
Definitely creepy.
Right.
That thick mist is my absolute favorite to photograph in. And in the Blue Mountains, when it comes in and you have the trees, you have this incredible depth and it just obliterates. So it creates a very, and claustrophobic could be a way to describe it, but I find it hugging and comforting and warm, that feels like I've got something wrapped around me, and I quite like a dark room and tight forests and those sort of places, so that when the mist comes in, it's incredibly important to my psychology, and I'd actually choose to live somewhere in the thick mist because I find it so comforting.
You probably wouldn't like our east wind that comes with it, though, because bizarrely our mist does come with this cold wind. It's very strange. It was very odd to me when we first moved here because, coming from central England, a thick fog there means it's still, completely still, but it's the opposite here. It's something to do with the temperature inversion. And because, I visited the Blue Mountains a few years ago and we got every kind of weather. We got boiling hot sunshine one day and then we got mist the next day. And it was absolutely wonderful. You're right. I loved it. It was so beautiful in the mist and I got some beautiful pictures.
It is gorgeous. I'm really fascinated by the fairies down in the grasses.
The fairies,
and,
yes.
And also that you said that's where the magic is. And tell me, could you tell us a little bit more about, this discovery that this is where things were happening for you and some sort of excitement there?
Yeah. Well, I recently wrote an article where I referenced this, and I had to actually admit in the article that I didn't know how I knew when the magic was there. I just knew, it's an instinct. And years ago, I was told by a wonderful mentor that I had when I was starting out that I should always try and follow my instincts when photographing, to never get bogged down in the technical side, because he could see that I had no interest in the technical side and very little ability in that way either. And he told me only to learn as much about how to handle a camera as I would ever need to know, which has stood me, in very, very good stead. So I do just literally follow my instincts, and you just get a feeling. This is why I think I love to photograph near water, because you've got that movement and you know that they're there. They're there twinkling in the background. And last winter we had a snowfall, which is quite unusual for us here because, as I say, we're warmed by the Gulf Stream, so we don't get an awful lot of snow. And the sun was just coming up and I knew that I would be able to get, to find some fairies, and I did. But, just as quickly, they can just turn the lights out. It was literally like being in a landscape with fairy lights for a few minutes. And then it was like, well, you've had your lot now. We've shown you our realm and you've had enough. You can't see any more. It's our secret realm. And the thing about it is that when you try to recall it, it's like a dream because you can't get hold of it. You can't bring it back. It's meant to be this place where probably not that many people actually have the privilege of going. I don't know, because you have to be very quiet and I think you have to know how to look, is what I tell people.
I wonder if a lot of our creative work that feels magical is a little bit like that, like fleeting, and we can't quite recall how we got there, or and maybe it's just a feeling that we're left with sometimes.
Yes, I think I would agree with that.
And Nikki, did that come with photographs and artworks at the same time, or did this magical experience happen and then is a lifetime of chasing it and trying to capture or create something that's related to that?
I think I realised that I'd tapped into something here in this landscape of Orkney that I could relate to and that I could communicate to other people. And I think that's kind of what set me on the path. It was the flowers that definitely opened things up for me. And, when I started realising, the seas around here, and I don't know whether you've seen some of my wave pictures on my website or on social media, again, I went for the detail. I go with a long lens because when you are granted the privilege, you can see monsters and creatures in the waves quite clearly. It's quite extraordinary. And I'm not the only one, but interestingly, other people see different monsters. So, I guess it depends what you're looking for or, what is granted to be revealed to you at any one time.
So when you say other people see different monsters, you mean in the artwork or in the same ocean?
No, in the artwork.
Yeah. The reason I wanted to clarify that is I really believe that beautiful artworks speak so many different stories to so many different people. And this is where camera clubs often end up quite wrong, is that there's this idea that an artwork needs to communicate a single idea and they communicate it really quickly, and that by doing so, it's really good. My more deeper understanding is that the greater the depth of the stories and multiple layers of stories, and that they speak different stories to different people, makes for a more interesting artwork. And then some people see multiple stories and then they keep engaging over time and they keep wanting to keep looking because they can see one monster and then maybe another one emerges or someone else sees a different one, and then this conversation continues and continues over time. And I think these layers and multiple meanings are incredibly powerful. And that's what I'm actually now searching for, is how do I actually pursue this idea that there's more than one thing happening in the artwork.
Yeah, it's a very interesting idea. I agree.
Nikki, I have a question.
Sure.
And this goes back to you said this was your aunt who.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm just double checking because my mind wanders from that and moves on to what we're actually talking about. So it made me think of that quote from Matisse. That is, I actually looked it up. It's, what quote I'm talking about. Creativity takes courage. And, I love that. I love this part of your story, that your catalyst for really beginning your photographic journey was your aunt telling you, you need to go do this. And so I'm wondering, it seems like that would take a lot of courage. And I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about that. Like, what was that like to have that experience where you were inspired to then go do this work and create? And was there a time where you were like, Like, were you freaked out? Like, I'd love for you to talk about that, the courage part of really starting to put yourself out there and creating things that maybe were kind of against, what the norm was.
I think I should probably take you back to when I was quite a young child. My parents
let's do that. I'm interested. I'm in. Let's do it.
I had a very happy, stable childhood. My father was a music teacher, and he started me on piano lessons when I was probably 7-ish. And one of my strongest childhood memories is of me sitting at the piano to practice whatever piece it was he'd given me and mucking around with the time, like a jazz pianist might do. And my parents just coming down on me like a ton of bricks. You can't do that. That's not what the music says. You must do what the music says. So, being the good, obedient child that I was, I did what the music said. And then a couple of years later, we were asked to write an essay in class. I cannot remember what the title was supposed to be or what the instruction was, but what I wrote was about what it was like to be a honeybee inside a flower. And I got told that if I ever wrote like that again, I would get a line put through my work. So, of course, that immediately shuts down any creativity. And then I went to school. I was a good student. I went to university. I was a very bad student, and I got on with my life. I got married. I had children. I saw my parents photographing nature very beautifully, but again, very down the line, very straight, nature photography. And then Auntie Catherine, and then she died, and then, there she was on my shoulder, and it released something in me. So there was absolutely no need for any courage. It was there. It had just been waiting all my life to come out. And I've always had a very strong sense of what I've wanted to do and what I wanted to show. I've never gone with trends. I've never, camera club. I never took pictures to win competitions or anything like that. So really, it was a very easy transition for me. It's never been an issue for me at all. I photograph what I want, what I hope will communicate something. If people get that communication, I'm delighted. If not, well, I know it meant something to me. So that's my answer, I guess.
That's really amazing. By the way, I have to say,
by the way, definitely not brave.
well, I think, maybe it is like bravery sometimes, to like, because I think it's one thing to make art for us, that we don't really need, maybe we need courage or we don't, to do, but then to share this with other people, like, how is it for you initially sharing this work with other people and kind of really becoming more of who you rediscovered?
It's been a fun journey, actually, because fairies aside, I think, where my heart really lies are the birds, actually. So I've always kind of gone with that idea that, and my Auntie Catherine was, a huge bird lover. Birds were really, what she loved the most, and I think what she knew most about. I showed a lot of bird pictures, and I think people understood how much I loved them and how much I was trying to communicate Auntie Catherine's love for them. And, I've told that story. I used to do talks, when we lived south. And people always loved that story, that I was really, speaking on her behalf. And I just see them as magical creatures. There's that word magical again. I want to show their beautiful ethereal nature. They're creatures from another realm. And part of the reason I think I love seabirds so much is exactly that reason. They are so unknowable. I mean, the Arctic terns I was sitting with this morning, they have the longest migration of any creatures on the planet. Can you imagine that? They go from, where we are here, right at, in the northern hemisphere, they migrate to the Antarctic and back. And they're tiny, they're small birds. And I just want to know about them. I want to know where they go. What do they see? It's just, they leave our realm, they go into theirs, and the mystery of it just blows me away. It leaves me speechless and tearful, really. Yeah.
It's incredible how many hours they fly for, isn't it?
I know. They are the most extraordinary little birds. They really are. And I was sitting there this morning with the rain coming in and the wind and just watching them just gliding above the nesting site and negotiating, with those beautiful long wings of theirs, negotiating how to land. And you see they have to take several passes at it. And then one of them will come in with a little pipefish. And you can see that it kind of knocks them off balance slightly. They've got to figure out, with these minute movements of their wings, how am I going to not bump my nose on the rock, when I come down? But I find it quite overwhelming. When they leave, I grieve. I grieve for them. I really do. I miss them dreadfully.
Yes, because not all of them make it, do they, in that huge flight?
Absolutely not. And unfortunately, the last 2 years, the chicks have been predated. And so for the last 2 years, we didn't know whether enough of them would come back to start a colony. And, the first year the chicks got predated, I practically knew them by name. I spent so many hours with them. And then, I got there early one morning at dawn and the hooded crows had taken the chicks. And I was just distraught for weeks. It was terrible. Just terrible. I took it quite personally.
I spent some time living on an island and the turtles would hatch during summer that we were there. And it was fascinating because, hundreds of turtles would come out and the birds would go absolutely nuts for this beautiful food. And us humans had this incredible protective element and wanted to protect the turtles as they headed out to the ocean as well.
Yes.
I always felt guilty being a part of that because I also felt sorry for the birds and the natural order of things. And, there was this wanting to interfere because we felt, that these turtles were so cute and so special and so magical, and particularly watching them come and live. But out of a whole nest, or out of a laying, I suppose you call it, there might only be one that makes it to full maturity. And it is a numbers game for them as they're born.
We saw them in Florida too. They used to nest along the beach where we lived and, they were highly protected. One of my fondest memories is of walking on the beach very early one morning and seeing this little, hatchling turtle struggling down the beach towards the water, and off it went, and it was just the most incredible thing to see this tiny little thing set off on this amazing journey. It's extraordinary. And then, the rangers would come and, when the turtles were all gone, they would dig open the nests and you could see these white eggs that looked like squashed ping pong balls. It was quite an amazing thing to see. But, I've often thought that to love nature is to be heartbroken most of the time because obviously, we all have to eat something. And yes, it's heartbreaking to see the birds eat the baby turtles. And it's heartbreaking for me to see another bird eat a tern chick. And so it goes on, but everything has to eat. Nothing to do about it, really. It's just life, isn't it?
Very much so. I was wondering whether your aunt gave you permission to share your work and to sort of created a safe space in a sense. Like Bree was talking about courage and you'd sort of denied that in a sense. And I was just sort of picking on that, wondering then perhaps it was a different feeling in there that came in this sort of safeness that she's created for you.
I don't think so. I didn't recognize a different feeling. In fact, I don't feel her as strongly now as I did, say, 10 years ago. I just feel that I'm confident in, the fact that I can carry on doing what she wanted me to do, and show the beauty. And the other thing about it is there's so much ugliness in the world. I just want to show beauty. I'm not particularly an activist type. I probably should be because I get very angry about certain things. But it's difficult to go on marches and things when you live, hundreds of miles from London and you've got to get on a plane to do it. It's expensive. So my way of trying to make the world better is to put out this beauty because I think it's really, really important. Nature is under such threat, as we all know. If people don't know what's out there to admire and to love, then, I think it's up to us artists to show that. Don't you agree?
Well, I definitely think that there's enough mess in the world and I try to add beauty And natural beauty is very, very high on my agenda there, and exploring that visually as well. And I think that that's an incredibly powerful medium to work with it.
I always think it's interesting when I see artists or photographers take something that we typically think of as ugly or messy or, I mean, obviously imperfect, and turn it into something maybe beautiful in a like a wabi-sabi kind of a way. Or
yeah, I'm into that. Yeah,
right. Or even something that feels interesting and makes you look again and have a thought about it. And why is it that way? And so I think there's place for, all kinds of different art out there. So, yeah, cause I don't know that I absolutely love, well, maybe I do love the kind of sweet, work that just is a little bit surface pretty. I make those sometimes, but
sure.
more and more I feel myself attracted to what's messy about this, and how can this chaos be organized, and what am I attracted to? So I think that's interesting too.
Yeah, no, most definitely it is. And, that's a real skill, I think, to be able to think like that. Not sure that I have that skill, but you clearly do. So
I don't know that I think like that. I just think that I'm interested in thinking like
no, but that's good, because it's another direction to go in, isn't it? And, I think one thing I like about being somewhere like Orkney, and now I understand how the seasons work, and they're very different from seasons down in the south of England. It's a completely different climate. I can go deeper now because I know what to look for. We don't really get much of an autumn here. We don't get any autumn color because the wind comes and it just blows all the leaves off. And in fact, we hardly have any trees because it is such a windy place. So we have a couple of little areas of woodland, that are kind of slightly protected valleys, but we have few trees apart from that. So really no autumn color. But I relish the coming of winter, because the storms come. We get these huge Atlantic storms, and that's chaos for you. That's chaos.
yes, and always with the wind.
Absolutely. And I've just got this thing. I try to get as close as possible, as I safely can, to the chaos. And sometimes I wonder what it must be like to be in the middle of it all. And I've had this feeling that maybe it's like being in the middle of a creation event. The birth of a star, the maelstrom of the waves and the huge power and the noise, the thundering, booming into the cliffs. Yeah, well, we'll never know, will we? But that's kind of what I think it must be like.
Maybe we get to watch the movie of it later.
Maybe.
I don't know. Well, one of the things I totally hear what you're saying. And it's not just that I'm hearing this, but and we'll post the link to Nikki's website where you can look at her beautiful work. But I did look through I looked through a bunch of things, but in particular, your ocean images, that there's a lightness about them, but also some tension, because it's like frozen movement. You just know that it's wild,
Mm.
And I also feel like there's some like metallic-y. It's almost it's not. They're not soft. There's a lot of soft and pastels, but with the waves, they sometimes feel metallic, almost like they're so crisp. And I don't know. I don't even know what you do. We said we were going to talk about technique. I'm not saying that, but I don't know what you do. But
I do very, very little. I use a long lens. I can't get too close, but
no, you can't, and it's beautiful.
But the quality of light here is extraordinary. That's the thing about being on latitude 59. The air is very, very clear, and I have a special spot on the west coast. Nothing between me and Canada, basically 3,000 miles of wave power coming at me. and that's extraordinary. And, I probably shouldn't be saying this, to an audience, but, my husband knows, so it's okay. When we were first here, and, I wanted to be in the middle of all this. And I sometimes would have this urge to almost want to throw myself into the sea, into this chaos, to just hurl myself off a cliff. And it was nothing to do with wanting to end my life. It was just wanting to experience this extraordinary, extraordinary power. I mean, a lot of the north coast of Orkney, the northwest coast, is unmapped, I'm told. There are no decent charts, and it's full of shipwrecks and all sorts. There go those ghosts again. But my little spot on the west coast, I'm the only one that knows where it is. I've never told anyone because I don't want anybody else to find where I take my pictures. So if I fell in, they'd never find me.
Right.
But I'm shooting into the light, which is what will give it, that quality, I think. And sometimes the water just goes black. It's just extraordinary. It's an inky black with gold highlights. Very, very beautiful.
That's so wonderful. It's like John Muir. Hey, sorry, Len. It's kind of like your John Muir. John Muir used to go up in the trees when there was these big storms, and he would just ride them so he could be in it,
Yeah.
And I think there is something to having our environment be such a place that we want to create, that place that draws us there. And whether it's photography or something else, I think environment does make such a huge difference for us.
And I think, being in an environment like Orkney, where we have these huge wide open spaces and, enormous skies, it clears your mind. And it's scary at first. Because, like I said, I didn't know how I was going to communicate what I was feeling and, my experiences of the place. So, it just forces you to really be still and just see what comes out, and the fairies were the first thing that came out. But this incredible power of the sea and the monsters. I mean, the sea here is full of ghosts and monsters. And obviously, being a group of islands, fishing is a major part of the economy here and has always been, I guess. So obviously, over the centuries, a great many people have been lost at sea. Fishermen die in storms all the time. So those ghosts are there, and they're very real. And a lot of the myths and legends have come out of, I think, trying to rationalize how, these losses would occur, which is, quite interesting, really. Yeah.
Your work often disappears down rabbit holes of abstraction and a quite playful exploration. What leads you down those sort of paths?
Well, ever so often, I think I want to strip it back, a bit like the environment here, quite stripped back, quite bare, open. And I suppose it's a sense of wanting to really get to the essence of something. This is why very often you'll see, for example, a lot of my bird pictures with no backgrounds. And it's not that I take the backgrounds out, it's that I actively seek a particular kind of light photograph in, or, on a beach where, you've just got a bit of water there and some sand. I don't want the distractions. When we were in Northumberland recently, in the north of England, I don't know whether either of you know the north of England at all, but there's a beach in the northeast where there's some incredible rocks on the beach. They are, I think, sandstone, and they are the most extraordinary shapes and colours. Well, they sort of come and go because obviously the storms will cover them in sand, and they were quite covered over when we were there recently. But when I was actually on the beach experiencing the whole scene, it was really, it was typical English spring. It was grey, it was cold. The southeast wind was 25 miles an hour, relentless. There were waves, there were white horses in the sea. There were those, what do they call, the blow carters? They're sort of like go-karts on the beach with these great big sails. It was all just kind of shapes and swirls, which echo what you see in the rocks. So I just basically took some pictures and thought, well, this doesn't really say anything about the experience that I had. So I just basically tried to get down to lines, very, very simple black lines that would echo my experience of being on the beach that day. So that's what I did. I mean, I can tell you how I did it, but you don't want to know. promise I won't.
Well, maybe we do want to know, but I think you should keep the magic to yourself.
I think so too.
So Nikki, this is actually something that I actually posted about this on Instagram today. I shared an image from White Sands because I've been thinking recently a lot about space, and you talk about having this, 9 months. I've heard a couple of little threads here. One is the 9 months where you kind of wandered,
Yeah.
And the other one is like this island for you. There's empty spaces. And to me, that's really interesting. I even did a little exercise. I'm holding this up. You guys can't see it. Okay. So I have two of the same cup. I mean, this is just what I'm thinking about today. So one, it did have more water in it. So I have two of the same cup, and one had more water. It was almost full, but I drank some. Okay. So pretend that has a lot more water. And then one is empty, and, or one has nothing in it. I'll rephrase that. One has water, like let's say to the top, and then one has nothing in it, or no water in it, actually, because, there's air in it. So there's something in it. And then the exercise was, and this was really interesting. I actually kept my voice notes out while I did this. So 1 minute, you look for 1 minute at the one that's full of water, and then you look for 1 minute at the one that doesn't have the water, and then you look for 1 minute at both of them side by side. It was really interesting, some of my observations, because I'm finding that I'm shifting how I think about space and the nothingness, and how it sounds like for that 9 months, and maybe you can speak to this. I'll pause. I'm curious for that 9 months, and maybe for some other times, like what that taught you about space, and like filling your time with things, and or maybe patience, and what that taught you about your own creativity and your own work and your own process. That was a long question. Sorry.
Oh dear, where shall I start? Well, it certainly taught me to be patient, I can tell you that. And I'm not a patient person. I should point that out. I'm extremely impatient generally in my life. Oh gosh. It taught me not to be afraid of empty space, I think, is one thing I would say. Yes, my mind has always been very busy, and I've always kept myself extremely busy. And coming here, it was just so different. There were fewer things to do. And it was a deliberate part on our part to move here and, to be quieter. And I wanted to undertake a project. So I think I just had to sit with that space and just let it be, and see what would start to fill it.
How'd that feel at the beginning of that? Totally.
Panic stricken at first, actually. Do you know that feeling?
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Yeah. When we're so used to creating and going and moving and doing and filling, that it feels like, that's why I had said the cup is empty, because it feels empty, but it's not really, right? So
no, exactly. That's right. I mean, as you know, when you're a busy parent and you're working, you're never still. Your mind is never still. There's always something else to do and always somebody else to think about. And then, you have a change or it stops for some reason. And yeah, you're right about that glass being, there is something in it. Of course there is. But you've got to stop and listen and look, haven't you? That's the thing. You've got to listen and look. That's very important.
One of the things Go ahead, Lynn.
So has your mind become stiller in this process after, years of being there?
Yes, I think it has. It certainly has when I'm photographing, because I know that to get what I think I'm looking for, I've just got to be quiet and sit with it. Otherwise, how are you going to know when you've got it, for a start? The fairies aren't going to announce themselves loudly in your ear or in front of you, are they? They're going to come quietly. And sometimes they don't come at all. I mean, that should be said. Perhaps they realize I'm not in the mood, or they don't think I deserve it for some reason. They do not always reveal themselves. And sometimes the sea monsters don't reveal themselves. But the birds always have the magic. The magic is always there.
It's a fascinating story because that's something that I chase as well, is this quietness in my mind, and also getting lost from a busy mind that overthinks, that's always continually thinking and doing stuff. And making art is often doing. And,
yes, very true.
But the magic times are when I disappear into it. And that only happens occasionally. And it doesn't happen every time I actually make art, or I make things like bookmaking or printing. But there's times where it does happen, and it actually happens not only when I'm making art, but it can also happen when I'm walking or just in the bush. And it's these moments of total peace and presence. And I like to call it presence, where I'm totally grounded and there, and I notice everything. And the breaths of the wind start talking to me, and I become very, very grounded. And it's addictive, but it's also incredibly beautiful. And it's probably one of the reasons that I'm so enamored with creating and being in that environment, is to try and get to that space again where I can just be present and have that less busy mind.
I think my secret weapon really is my love of water, because I'm a swimmer and I immerse myself in the sea, several days a week. I swim all year round without a wetsuit, and it's a very visceral experience. It is a matter of life and death. You absolutely have to be in the moment when you're swimming in winter on latitude 59, And it just connects me to nature, I think, in a way that, a swimming pool never could. I mean, I do swim in the pool as well because, in winter we can't be in the sea for very long here. But it's just, I love it. It calms me every time. I can be feeling dreadful. I mean, take lockdown, for example, all the anxiety and the misery and, the not knowing what was going to happen, and everybody was frightened. And I just would get into the sea and start swimming with my face in the water, and it all just goes away. It just melts away. It's like magic.
There's an incredible amount of research about cold and heat immersion on our mental health and the chemicals that it releases, and how beneficial it is. I've actually just been listening to Huberman talk about it, and it's very well known, isn't it? And it is a magical thing. I have quite a few swimmer friends, and I struggle with swimming. It's not something that I can connect with, but
no. I mean, it's massively, wildly popular here, especially when lockdown started and the pool closed, and, people were desperate for some sort of connection with the outdoors. It just exploded here, which is wonderful to see. We have so many wonderful, beautiful beaches and places to swim.
And there's Momo. So Momo always shows up in the podcast at some point. We just never know when. He's such a good, tiny guard dog. Len's going to go get him. Okay, I'll share while Len takes care of Momo. One of the things that, going back to this kind of empty, space experiences, when I first went out into White Sands National Park, in that park, and maybe also in dunes, in wide expanses of dunes, I would imagine, there's really, if you're out in large ones and there's no like real plants around or anything, it's silent. So there's no planes, there's no birds. If there's no wind and it's still, if there's nothing, there's just nothing. And it almost is like a ringing in your ears because it's so silent. And I thought, it's just me and my brain here. Like there's really nothing except for what I see visually to pull myself, to pull my thoughts away. And it's such an interesting experience to kind of be in that. And at first it was unnerving because I wasn't used to the quiet and the space and the still. And over time, when I go back, I've learned to cherish it. Like I want that now. I want that space. And I think this exercise that I did today is reminding me that I want to recreate that more in my daily life, because, without having to like go somewhere or, dive in the ocean or whatever, how can we create these little bits of it? And how does that add to our creativity? Because I thought actually one of the things I wrote down when I was looking at this cup that was not full of water, it's not empty, but not full of water, I thought there's so much possibility there. You could fill it with all kinds of things, I mean, it really is like this vessel of possibilities. And that is actually really fun. So when you take it from like, and maybe this is what happened to you, when you go from like, it's kind of feels unnerving, it's uncomfortable, I don't know what to do here. And then you start to embrace all of it. Then it changes.
Yes. I think that's right. I think it does change, and I cherish it too, and I definitely seek it out. And I think, going back to a point I think you made earlier, I think I'm a much quieter person than I used to be, which I like. Definitely over the last 5 or 6 years, I have quietened down, and it's also about listening to the stories that the birds and the flowers are trying to tell me. And I'm not going to hear their stories if I've got too much brain chatter going on. Simply got to be quiet. I want to know what the terns have been doing in the years since I last saw them, and the puffins and the razorbills and all the others, And I think, I don't know whether you saw, it was a picture I took very recently of a razorbill, and I took it down to pure abstraction. And I just got lucky with the light. So the sun was out and the bird is black. It has a black back. It's got a white stripe along the face. They had its back to me, and there was a cliff behind it, and the cliff was in shadow. And so all you could see really was the edge of the bill and this white line and the white outline just around the edges of its little white tummy. And I thought, that's really what I'm aiming for. That is the essence of that bird, pure abstraction, no distractions, just a quiet, abstract image. Does that make any sense?
Fabulous. Will you share that with us so we can share it with our listeners?
I think it was one of the ones that I sent.
Did you put on there? Okay, so great.
Claire asked me to
fill out a form. We have everyone fill out a form so that it makes it easy for everyone. Fabulous. Then we will share that. Woo!
So yes, I think my razorbill is on there. Yes, and there's I think I sent some fairies, the cowslips. Yes, I did. I can't remember what else I said. I don't know. It's nearly my bedtime. I'm falling asleep.
Everyone's falling asleep here.
I'd like to just talk about the metaphor, because you're both talking about an incredibly beautiful metaphor, and that is that about the space. And Bree, you're talking about the space inside the cup, and that's what actually defines a cup, isn't it? Is the space inside it and what it can do, rather than the outside form of it. And that's just what we see. And when we're talking about the island and the place of where it is, and the space that it brings to you, there's an incredible connection. And it took a while to find. And it was about giving yourself space in doing that as well, to calm and to connect. And then when you do, that's when the magic happens. And I think that that's absolutely an incredibly beautiful thing to happen, that when we stop and slow down and we actually really connect with the environment and with Mother Nature and animals and the plants and the spirits and the magic happens, and it starts talking to us in ways that are inexplicable. And it's an incredibly beautiful experience. And channeling that energy into creativity is just, I think that's magical in itself. And these records or these artworks that come from this are infused with that magic, and I absolutely adore your work. And
thank you.
As we talk about it, it's opened my eyes to what's going on in there, and it's added this incredible depth to your artwork. And I love it even more having talked to you about it and this magic in them. And now I'm feeling it when I'm looking in the work. So,
that's great.
It's absolutely beautiful.
So much, then. That's so lovely to hear. It really is. It's I'm thrilled. Thank you. It's very kind of you. When you go out into your beloved Blue Mountains, for example, do you go out with any particular agenda, or do you just go out and see what you can, hear that day or see or sense?
A mix of both. So I have particular places that I connect with, and so sometimes I choose to go to those places, and I think that that's a decision that I make before I go. And I head off and go, right, this is going to be a good morning, and I'm drawn to there. But that's actually quite rare. I often just start wandering and see where I turn up, and I hop in the car if I'm driving and I don't even know where I'm going, and I start going somewhere and I find myself somewhere else, and I'll visit one spot and I don't connect, and I end up in another spot. And some days I can walk all day and don't feel connected with my art. And other days I'm totally immersed and lost in it, and it's very, very different at different times, and that depends on my own mental state, but also the light and what's going on in Mother Nature that day as well, as to whether it's ready for me to connect with it, I think.
Well, it's like the fairies, sometimes they have no wish to connect with me, I think. I know. For me, it's the wind. I listen to the wind and it tells me where I need to go. But sometimes I can't connect either. Sometimes I'll just set off in a direction, like you do, and I'll wander and I'll not find anything. But sometimes I find it when I least expect it. That's always a joy, isn't it? Like, for example, a couple of days ago, I went to the Terns and they weren't there. They were all off feeding somewhere. So I thought, well, I'll just walk along that stretch of coastline. And it's a spectacular walk. It's just so beautiful. The cliffs aren't high there, but the sea is just gorgeous. It comes crashing in from the north. And all sorts of other birds, and beautiful waves. I had a, really lovely walk. Got some nice pictures that I just would never have expected that I would find, which was a joy,
And sometimes I plonk myself down somewhere and stop the walking and actually start to try to notice more. And I think sometimes I mask the seeing by walking so much, because it's connected with what's going on with my mind, obviously. And when I do just sit, eventually I start to notice, and eventually I have to pick up my camera and start making art, and it becomes impulsive in the end. And I'm a firm believer that there's art everywhere. Yeah. It's just a matter of, do I choose to connect with it or not?
Yeah.
And I was thinking about this, and I think I've talked about it on here before, but the nature has its power and is talking to us nonstop. And I think it's whether we choose to listen or not as to whether we connect. So it's a little bit of the opposite to what you're saying with the fairies that choosing to show themselves or not. For me, I think it's whether I'm prepared to listen or not.
It could be that way around for me as well. It could be that I'm just not in the right frame of mind to hear them or feel them or see them. It could be either way, I guess, could it not? But I must admit, I try not to walk too much. I try to, get to a spot and sit. Like you say, you've got to sit and observe. I think that's quite important. And the other thing that I notice here, and I would imagine in Australia people must feel this as well, that when you go to the coast, I'm on the edge of a continent, as are you. Anywhere,
yes.
In Australia that you went to the beach, you would be on the edge of the continent. But here, I'm right on the edge of Northwest Europe. And I love that feeling, that feeling of just, it's like the end of the world. It's very special.
And particularly when there's no other people there, isn't it? There's I think that having that isolation allows Mother Nature to be itself more freely.
Absolutely.
And also you don't have the distraction of all the people and the modern changes to things. And I notice that my connection increases the further I get away from civilization, and the further I walk into a wilderness, the calmer I get, and the better the photographs become, or the better the artwork becomes. Or if I'm walking down a well-trodden path to a lookout, it's very, very different to walking into bush that other people don't walk in, and I'm off track and I'm wandering around, and then I'm seeing things that are new and delightful to me. And that's where I find the magic in my art, is being somewhere that's quite unique and magical and lonely. And yeah.
I understand what you mean about loneliness. Yeah, I get that very much so. It's almost like it's the joy grief thing for me, the two sides of the same coin. I can feel intense joy that will bring tears. Absolutely. And yet, within the flick of a switch, it can turn to grief for what we're about to lose in the world, That's very, very strong in me, very often making my art, particularly with the birds, I think, because you see their vulnerability in a way that, you wouldn't say with the waves, that it's just myth and power. But the birds, this year is just weird. Nature is so off kilter here this year. And I don't know if it's because we've had a cold, wet spring, or whether, I think it's partly that. I think it's possibly partly the bird flu epidemic, climate change, all those things. And something is definitely off, and it's grievous. Definitely.
I was only reading this week that there's a 60% chance that the planet will warm 1.5 degrees in the next 3 years or something.
It's horrific.
That's absolutely incredible. They were talking about, a 1.5 degree change over 20 years, and it'll happen in a year or two. And
you're coming into a fire season, aren't you, in the next...
Yes, we've just finished a 3-year wet season.
Yeah.
And now we're at the beginning of what's going to become a dry, and whether it's as long and as big as the last one, we tend to go into quite long droughts, but it's so unknown. And these seasons, El Nino and El Nino in Australia affect us the most, and they're caused by ocean currents. We have no idea what's going to happen with the oceans as things change. And the animals know, and the plants know. I think that's my opinion.
Absolutely, they do. I mean, it's the same up here with the Gulf Stream. With the melting of the glaciers in Greenland and Iceland and the Arctic, it's changing the salination in the ocean, and it's changing, the Gulf Stream, and that would be catastrophic. Well, for lots of people, but certainly for Northwest Europe, it would probably, we'd get another ice age if the worst came to the worst. Let's hope it doesn't come to that. I'm sure lots of people believe it won't happen, and I really hope it doesn't happen. But as you say, it's the big unknown.
Very much so.
Yeah.
Well, one of the things that I've learned today is, you've reminded me, is very much about this connection with emotion. And as you were talking then at the end about, tears and joy at the same time, it's this inexplicable amounts of emotion that we play with as artists and that we want to create in our work. And when we turn to it, rather than technique or other parts of it, that's where the magic really happens. And it's when we connect with magic. I don't know. That's such a beautiful way to finish up on. What do you think, Bree?
I agree. And I was thinking the exact same thing, that as, creative people, we want more emotion, and we love to see it in our work, and we find it in other people's work. And emotions are just such a beautiful part of being human, whether it's joy or, sadness or grief or excitement or, or, whatever it is that we're experiencing. It's really beautiful. So yeah, I think this is a great place to end. Nikki, do you have any last comments on that? And then tell us where our audience can reach you.
Well, my website is nickigwynjones.com, all one word. So I try to keep it relatively up to date. Facebook and Instagram, Nicki Gwynn-Jones. I would love to have new friends. So just, come along and join me. Going back to the emotions thing, I think I would say, don't be afraid to let the tears come. If you are just faced with an inexplicably beautiful scene, like I was yesterday morning, let the tears roll. It's very cathartic, and it will show. If you decide to make art at that point, people will know. They will know. And don't be afraid to cry in grief either. Last year, a year ago, when the bird flu hit, and I found 23 dead birds, big, beautiful gannets. I know you have them in Australia too, within a very short stretch of beach, and I was inconsolable. And, again, it's very cathartic, and that too will show in your art. People will know how much you love what you're photographing. I think it comes through loud and clear if you are honest with your emotions.
What beautiful sage advice. I think that's incredibly special. And yes, people can see it and they can feel it as well. And it's the key to art, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
Incredible, beautiful emotions. We were lucky enough to publish your work in Lens Journal Volume 2, Issue 2.
Indeed you were. Yes, it was my great honour. I was very thrilled.
There's a beautiful set of gorgeous bird photographs in there, and they're absolutely stunning. And we do still have a few copies of those if anyone wants to pick them up. They're printed in 6 colours, so they're really, really a beautiful thing.
And they did come out really, really beautifully. And those terns are the ones I'm currently photographing now. So if you do go onto my social media pages, that is what you will see from the last few days, and hopefully many more days to come. I'm spending a lot of time with them because they're only here for, a couple of months every year, 2 or 3 months. It's my spirit bird. I've decided that, when I come back for my next life, I'm going to be an Arctic tern. I can be as feisty as heck, and I can travel the world, and, I can visit other realms that are just not... I cannot at the moment, and I look forward to that, of becoming one of my spirit beings. I think that would be very nice.
I love it. Well, what a great conversation this has been. This actually, we don't plan really what we're going to talk about, and I really love some of the things that we touched on. It's just so beautiful. So, Nikki, thank you so much for taking the time to join us in the evening.
Well, thank you for asking. I'm thrilled to be here, and it's just really nice to meet you both.
Yeah,
finally.
Yeah, in quotes, right? Exactly. If only we could all hug, it would be awesome.
Yeah,
a big group hug. How special and beautiful.
That's right.
And to be able to talk freely about this magic, I think here in Australia, there's a lot of people that don't want to engage with that sort of conversation, and it's so special to be able to do so, I think.
Well, I'm always happy to talk about fairies, Len. So, just get in touch.
Well, on that note, folks, I think it's time to say goodbye. So thank you very much, Nikki, and we'll say goodbye to everyone. Bye.
Thank you both very much indeed. Bye-bye.
Bye, y'all.
Thank you for joining us in our creative affair. If you love the passion we bring to this creative content, please support the podcast by sharing with a friend, subscribing, and leaving us a review. Thanks. If you'd like to learn more about creative photography, visit lenmetcalf.com, where you can find links to Len's photography school, videos, and publications. He would love to invite you to sign up to his newsletter. To find out more about my work, including my photography and mentoring in my Creative Confidence group coaching program, visit creativemindscoach.com. See you next time.